Hello, and this is a tutorial on how to do a drag and drop platformer. I'm going to show you the the end product here. This one I put a sword in and put a hitbox for a sword. This is what's called a state machine, in that the objects change to a different state, or a different object is loaded depending on what you're doing. So this is walking right, walking left, that's stand right, stand left. That is jumping, which is actually not a different object. It just sets the vertical speed. And then we have a little sword. The white is a little hitbox for the sword, which I can make invisible later. And if the sword hits an enemy, the blue enemies, destroys the enemies. And I have a view that follows the room. Okay, so let's get started. First, a word about sprites. Now this is a pretty good online program for making simple sprites, and this is a sprite a student made. However, when you make sprites, make them the whole width, or at least the whole, up and down height of the box, so that the sprite comes out to be 32 by 32. It also should cover the entire width. So when you are creating a new one, you want to create a 32 by 32 is probably a really good size. And then I make my floors and my other blocks 64 by 64. So there's plenty of room for your sprite to move around, or your object to move around the room. They won't get hung up. Because later when I cropped this, it came out to some funky size and doesn't match the room very well. It doesn't match because here's my room here. And this is 64 by 64, and the object that's in the room is completely different, so there's these gaps here which can cause problems. So just a word on that. Okay, so let's close this down. I'm going to give you just kind of an overview or a look of what we have here. I've got a player parent in which I have a creation event, and I'll change this to drag and drop a little bit, but I initialize some variables with this initialization script. I have a step event which will allow me to fall and to stop if I hit something. I have a left key which sets my horizontal speed if I don't exceed the speed limit, because I put a speed limit on the character or it'll just keep accelerating forever. And then I have a right press down here. It's not a press actually, it's a right. And that also sets horizontal speed. I've got a space which changes it into the sword object. I'm going to switch objects when I hit the sword. I'm also going to switch objects into walking when I hit left, or when I hit right. I'm also going to change objects into walking and put all my walking programming on those objects. And up, just hey, if I'm on the ground, then allow myself to jump. And here are the other objects. I've got a sword right and I've got a sword left object, which is just used as a collision box, just like a regular bullet would be, to destroy or damage the enemy, depending on what you want to do. Okay, so I'm gonna off camera, I'm gonna strip this thing down and I'm going to rebuild it. Should take a little bit. Hang in there. Okay, everything is stripped down now. I've taken all the programming off. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to program the parent. And I want to initialize some things called variables. Variables will store and keep track of values in the game, which are important for the playing of the game. So I'm going to initialize these variables on a creation event. If you go down here to control, you can see this set the value of a variable. First thing is I'm going to make a variable that's going to keep track of the way I'm facing. So I'm going to call it facing right, and I'm going to set this equal to true. So if I'm facing right, it's true, and if I'm facing left, it's false. The next variable I'm going to set here is going to be called, for me, speed limit. Limit. And I'm going to set my speed limit at 20. That's as fast as I'm going to let my player go. And what I do is I create a little document and I write down all my variable names so I can remember them later when I'm doing my programming. And then the next variable I'm going to set is for horizontal speed. I'm going to set this to 1, and that is, you can view that as the acceleration. That's as fast as we're going to be able to accelerate in the left or right when I hit the left or right key, or would it be A and D keyed if you're a WASD person. Horiz speed. Cool. That's plenty fast. And then I'm also going to set my jump speed, and I'm going to set my jump speed to 25, and that is how much, see, it's vertical speed I'm going to add to my player in order to jump. And I'm going to set my last one to gravity as speed, and I'm going to set that to 2. And that is going to be how strong gravity is. And gravity basically is just vertical speed also. And then I'm going to set friction, which is a built-in variable, which control the friction of my player on the platform. I'm going to set that to 0.2. And the reason I've done this is later in the game, I'm going to use these variables for my controlling my player. And if I want to make changes to the game, how my player moves, all I got to do is come in here and reset this variable, and that variable will change the other places in the game. Like if I use this variable other places in the game of speed limit and I change it here, it'll change it in the whole game, and it's all in one place, and it's easier to make changes to the game later. So variables are a good practice to do. Okay. Alright, now let's start doing a little bit of programming here. So I'm going to run a step event, just a regular step event. And this step event is going to set up all the actions like gravity and moving towards the blocks in the game. This will allow you to not fall through the floor and not to go through walls, and also, like I said, it'll set up the gravity. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my vertical speed, and this is going to be gravity. I'm going to set it to gravity speed. So all the time, this will be, because it's in a step event, it's going to be pulling the player down at whatever my gravity speed is set up by my gravity speed variable right here. Okay, so that's the first step. The next step is I want to check to see if I'm going to run into something. If I'm moving right, I want to check to see if I am going to run into something on the next frame. So I think that's over here in control, because this is a check. You see the shape of it? So I'm going to check collision now to see if I'm going to hit something on the next frame. I'm going to put h speed here, which is a built-in variable of the player. So we'll check my player and say, hey, if my h speed is 10, it'll check to see if I'm going to hit something the next frame, which would be 10 pixels away if I'm moving 10 pixels a second. Okay? And I definitely want to make that relative to me. So if there is a collision, I'm going to run this block of code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to that object, and I'm going to use direction, because that's the direction, another built-in variable that the player has on it. It's called direction. It's going to move the direction that the player is moving. So it doesn't change the direction of the player. And I'm going to put my maximum 5, because I don't want this to start happening until I get about 5 pixels away from things. So there's that. And then when I want to get to it, when I move close to the object, I want to set the horizontal speed, because this is left and right. I want to set the horizontal speed to 0. So that'll move me to the object and have me stop. Okay. The next part we're going to set up is we want to check up and down. So if I'm about to land on a floor, it will stop me horizontally, but still allow me to move vertically. I mean, it'll stop me vertically, but still allow me to move horizontally or back and forth. So go back to control, and we're going to do another check here. And this one is going to be V speed, which is the speed of my player, up or down. And I want to check that to be relative. I'm going to check it relative to me to see if I'm going to hit something, not up in the corner of the room. This relative button can get you, huh? And then again, I want to move a block of code in, and I want to move in contact once again. So that is right here. Okay, and again, it's going to be direction. So it'll take the direction that I'm traveling, and we're going to change this to 5. Once again, about 5 pixels. And then when I do that, I want to set this time, I want to set the vertical speed because I'm falling in this instance, and I want to set that to 0. So that should kind of keep me from falling through the floor and should keep me from going through walls, but it's not actually stopping the player. It's just stopping the player either vertically or horizontally, depending on if I'm going to hit a wall or if I'm going to hit a floor. Okay, now let's do a little bit of movement. I'm going to add an event, and it's going to be a keyboard, and let's move right first. The first thing is I don't want to go very fast, so I'm going to check an expression, and this expression is going to check my H speed. If my H speed is less than the speed limit, the variable I set up before, then I'm going to allow it to move. So this will check it so your player just will accelerate out into the twilight zone. And when I do that, I'm going to set this, my horizontal speed, horizontal. I'm going to increase it relative to whatever my horizontal speed is. So this will increase it since I set up my variable. What was my horizontal speed variable? Let's go check it out. Horizontal speed 1. Okay, so when I hit right, alright, if I'm not going over my speed limit, which I set up here in my variable here, here's my speed limit 20. If I'm not going more than 20, then I'm going to add 1 to my horizontal speed and move to the right. Okay, now let's do the left. So let's add event, keyboard, left. Left is a little more difficult to deal with. So again, I'm going to check my speed limit here. I'm going to check an expression. So a little bit of programming here. And I'm going to see if my H speed, which now is negative. Okay, so if that is greater than the negative speed limit, I am not going too fast in the negative direction, because if it's greater than a negative, then it's less than the speed limit. Oh boy, math, what a wonderful thing. Then I'm going to set my horizontal speed to negative because I want to go faster in the negative direction, and I believe it was HORIZ speed, and relative means I'm going to be going faster. Okay, that is the movement. Okay, let's throw this thing in the room and see if I made a mistake. So go to my room here, and let's see, that is the, right here, mouse over, that is the parent player. So alright, he's in the room. Alright, let's just see, cross your fingers here. Probably should pause it when that's going on. Oh my gosh, that's really slow. Alright, let's see if I hit a wall. Okay, let's see if I can make an adjustment to my gravity speed. Alright, so let's come back out of this, and let's see, gravity speed is set at 2. Let's have a look at that. Let's try a gravity speed of 25 instead of 2, because a vertical, yeah, that was pretty lame. A vertical speed of 2 was only like 2 pixels per second. So let's jump that up a little bit, and let's see if we like that a little bit better. You know, you can mess. Whoa, that was pretty fast. He dropped pretty quick. Well, I'll see when I get jumping. Let's work on jumping next, and let's see if that's going to be too fast with when I throw jumping in there. Okay, so let's open the parent back up, and let's go with what do I want to jump? I want my up key to jump because that's just the way I am. And so let's come in here, and with the jump, I'm going to use a key press. And I'm going to use the key press, and I like to use up. Now I want to check to see if my player is on solid ground. So I want to make sure that there's a floor directly below the player. So if there is something below the player relative to the player, then I'm going to set my vertical speed. I'm going to set my vertical speed up here in movement, and I want to go up, so I'm going to go negative jump, whatever my jump speed variable is, and so that should send me up in the air, and then gravity should bring me back down. So let's close that out. It's in the room. Let's give this thing a little bit of a test. It's kind of fun to play with these things. All right. I am not jumping. I need to check that out. What is going on with that? Okay, here's what I did wrong. I should have had the gravity speed set to 2. The gravity speed was too much for me to jump, so I think's wrong. Now when I come in here to the press up, right, that's cool. I could set that like that. But with my gravity seed, I want to set the vertical speed relative because you're going to accelerate. And so that was the problem. Did you notice in that first one that it was falling at like a constant velocity downwards? Let's see if this makes a difference. We all make mistakes. Anytime if you ever make a game and everything, you don't make mistakes, go straight to the casino. Oh, there we go. Now we got a jumper, except the animations aren't right, and we're not switching objects and things like that, and we will work on that right now. Okay, so before I go in and make these other objects to get my animations right, let's have a look at our sprites. This is my walking left, just the feet are moving. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off precision collision checking. It'll make it easier for the player not to stick to the floor. And then you can come in and you can modify the mask if your player is like has an arm sticking out or something like that ends up sticking to the walls or floors. You can take it manually, and you can use these numbers to bring it in. I haven't had that problem yet, so I don't need to worry about it. But we're going to turn all this off. Right now, I just have a little boxy player. This should work. I'm going to turn off sword left and everything like that. Sword right. Alright, so now all my players, I don't care about this fake sword thing here. I'll show you how to do that if you're interested. Okay, let's come back to the parent. And what we're going to do is we're going to switch objects if it goes right, left, or if it swings a sword. So I have my objects made already. So here's my walking one. So what I want to do is I want to switch over to a walking character when I hit left or right. And I also want to change my direction. Or I want to tell the walking object what direction I'm facing so I know which sprite to load for the walking object, whether I'm going to be loading walk left or walk right. So right now I have it on walk right. So by default, if everything's cool, it's going to be walking right. And I'll show you. I just have to do one check with that. So I'm going to use something separate so it doesn't switch the sprite a bunch of times when I'm holding the key down. And the way you do that is you're going to add event. It's going to be a key press right. With the key press right, I'm going to set my variable now. I'm going down to control, and I'm going to set, oh, oops. Wait a minute, whoa, wrong object. Here we go, key press right, sorry about that. I'm going to come into control, and I'm going to set facing right, that variable. Now if I'm pressing right, it is going to be true. I'm just going to make sure that that is true, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to switch objects to object player walking, and I need to perform the events, so it runs the creation event over here. So now we have that set up. Let's make the creation event for the walking character. So add event, creation event. The first thing I'm going to do is run a condition. Now if it's already facing right, sprite player walk right is okay. But what I need to do is I need to check if facing right is false. That means I'm facing left, okay? Alright, so facing right is false. I'm going to change the sprite into I want to walk left. So this will load the right, walking right, unless I'm facing left, and then it'll load the sprite of walking left and give a nice little animation. Now another thing I want to do is I'm going to throw a little bit of a check when I'm walking to see if I stop. So if I glide to a stop, I want to change it to a standing object. So add a step event, and I want to add it on this object, not the parent. So just this object will check for it. So I'm going to test for h-speed. It's built-in variable on the player, and if h-speed is equal to 0, I'm going to switch objects, and I'm going to switch it over to my player stand, and I'm going to perform the events of the creation event. So now if I hit left or right, it should, oh wait, right, cool, object walk. Okay, now it's just the right one. So let's do the left one too. So it's the same kind of thing. Add event, key pressed left. When I key press left, I want to set facing right to false. There we go. Now it'll load the left sprite because facing left is false, and that's right here. Or facing right is false. So it'll run this, it'll change the sprite. Then I want to change it into the player walking and perform events. I'm going to pause it while it loads, but let's check this out. Okay, it's loaded now. And you see the little features down here aren't moving because it's the standing object. Oops, I got to get the window in focus. Hit left, little feet move. Right, little feet move, and it switches. There it goes, right, left, so the sprites are switching. You can see it's facing a different way. When it stops that direction, you know, I could make a check, and I could also, I could probably make a check on when I switch back to the standing object, so he doesn't flip like that. Okay, so let's do that. Let's open up stand, and when stand is created, let's check the value of facing right, and if it's false, then I want to switch sprites into stand left, so it'll switch to the left. I'll make sure I have stand right here. I did, because it did switch. Okay, so now it won't do that about face when we switch. Alright, let's check that out. But I'll pause it for you. I'm gonna make one change here. I'm gonna change the player walk to an end step if h speed is equal to 0. Change and stop player walk. So it happens that like the end of the step event. It just is a lot smoother that way. So let's test it again. It was just flying all over the place. So I'm gonna do it as an end step. Let's see how that. Okay, here's my player. I can wait and get the focus here. Left or right. Right. Left. Good. I'm switching objects, but I have a parent object. So anything I do to the parent object, I don't have a sword. I think I'll do that in another video. So there you go. There's a little side scroller. Woohoo! I do have a view, but I have a in the room that's following the player. I mean, I can show you how to do that if you're interested. You just come into the room here. All right, and I have a huge room. So let's see. Go to the Views tab, and I enable the use of views. I want it visible when the room starts. My view in the room is 640 by 480, so it's a normal room size. And the port on the screen is 640 by 480. So the port is how big the window is, and the view in the room is how much of the room you're seeing. So if you start messing with, like, if you make this bigger, it'll kind of look like it's zoomed out. It'll shrink everything down. And then I have it following the player parent. Okay, so it'll follow. That means since it's following the parent, it will follow all of them, because all of the children of it, the walking and standing and the right and left, or the walking and standing, I should say, will also be followed. I changed the horizontal border to 128 and the V border to 128. That's how close the player needs to get to the end of the view before the view will follow the player. So that's just a real simple thing you can throw in there. And I think I'm going to do the sword thing in another tutorial. Okay.